Hi, everyone. This is Michelle Vakinis. I'm the founder and executive director of the Colette Louise Tisdall Foundation. Our mission is to improve outcomes in perinatal and infant health, as well as support grieving parents. And we do that through advocacy, education, and then what we're most known for, our financial assistance program. The program helps families who are dealing with high risk and complicated pregnancies, NICU stays, and loss. And we're coming up on our 6-year anniversary in September. And we have helped over 2,400 families in all 50 states and given away a little over 1.5 million. So it's been an incredible journey. And I'm so excited to be starting this series. So I have had such a fortunate opportunity to meet all these other incredible parents who are doing a variety of different things, but are all really rock stars. And so I really wanted to highlight some of them and just have a conversation about parenting and work and all of the things that I think we're dealing with. And so I'm super excited to have Sara Kelly join us. So I actually met Sara Kelly first through a virtual knitting group where we just knit together for a little while. And that was a lot of fun. And then we reconnected, and she has an amazing business doing home organization and has a variety of topics and support to do that. And then she has just launched a podcast very recently that I would love for her to talk about. So Sara, welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. And first, listening to talk about your organization, I hope you take a moment to really appreciate how much you've done and how
Yeah,
much you've helped others. Like, that is amazing. I think when we can take something that has impacted our lives and help others, which you will hear shortly is what I'm doing as well. But I always want to make sure people take a moment to just appreciate how much you've done. So
yeah.
thank you.
And thank you. That's always good. It's hard to remember to take those moments because I feel like there's still always work to be done. And so I feel like I kind of tend to do that. And I think a lot of us do. So thank you for giving me that moment.
But
I
that's
appreciate it.
the thing about being a parent is there's always more to do.
Right,
We're always hearing what's not going right. And
right.
so that is why I love to encourage people to stop and take a moment. I'm not great at it either. So I love when people stop and encourage me to take a moment.
Absolutely, for sure, for sure. So tell us a little bit, I mean, we kind of dived into parenting and some work and stuff like that, but tell us a little bit about kind of your parenthood journey and how that you ended up where you're at.
Yes. So, parenthood journey, my son is going to be 12 in September. I have one son, and it was not as easy as you read in all the fairy tale books. It wasn't as easy as we'd planned to get pregnant. It wasn't as easy as I thought to be pregnant. It wasn't as easy I thought to have a baby. I didn't think that was going to be super easy, but I didn't think it was going to be the journey I had. And then I thought, oh, that first day you're a mom, everything falls into place and is wonderful. And I was in a situation that didn't feel good in many respects. And my son had colic and I had postpartum depression and my husband was in a car accident. So I went from that, oh, everything's supposed to feel great to none of this feels good.
Right.
None of this feels good. So that was abrupt for me. And part of the work, as I'll share now, is about talking about all those aspects so people don't feel alone. Because luckily, when my son was born, there were blogs were popular. And so I could get to a lot of parenting blogs about colic and just not feel alone. But I think the more we can talk about every aspect of life, it's like somebody's going to hear you and need to hear that.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah. No,
navigated,
I
yeah.
love what you're saying. Like, I think that's so true. And that's something that like I also say is that, I think we're fed this narrative that like it's super easy to get pregnant. Pregnancy is this wonderful, beautiful thing. And in reality, a lot of people struggle to get pregnant, and a lot of people do not do pregnancy very well, myself included, right? Um, I still remember being pregnant with Colette and saying I'm going to write a book called Where the Hell is My Glow? Because I felt so awful during most of the pregnancy, right? And even like had lunch with a friend who was like, "You're glowing." I'm like, "It's sweat because I was puking all morning." Like, what are you talking about? And so I think the more and more that we're talking about that, we're taking away that messaging that everything is, I love that you use the term fairy tales, right? That it's not all fairy tale, and that's not the norm that is happening to families.
And I mean, I think it's great for the parts that do go easily. Like, let's celebrate those,
Right.
but also let's not keep the hard parts all buried down. Like, that's
Mm,
part of the story too. So yeah, I just want both parts to be open and talked
right.
about so that
Absolutely.
nobody feels alone.
Absolutely. For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
So you were going to get into some of the work you're doing and everything, which I am super curious to hear because the podcast is new enough that I don't know much about it.
I've got a couple of new ventures. So the quick through line from we moved when my son was 2.5. I was the primary parent. We didn't have any support network. And it was, okay, I need to find a job and a daycare, or I need to find a job that's flexible so that I can be with my son and I just work while he's in school. And so I went for the second one. So I started working for myself as a means to be the primary parent. And as he is more independent, I grow my business and do more. So it started out with cleaning homes when he was in preschool. And then being in people's homes, I started to see this frustration and shame around managing homes that people thought they were carrying all by themselves. And so from that, I realized, oh, I can help people in a different way, which is how I started Your Aligned Home, which is one-on-one home management consulting. And I love it. I always say, just let's talk about what doesn't feel good and let's make it feel good. And so I come up with customized solutions with people, and it really is, it's fun for me. It's like a riddle and there's always a solution. So I love doing that. And then I got to a point where I wanted to be able to share my work with more people because I can only work with so many people one-on-one. So I started creating a course, and through the same organization where you and I met another friend who had recently become very, it was a very abrupt change. My coworker, Lacey, fell into chronic illness. So she found herself at home, starting her career over, trying to figure out how to do a career with chronic illness. And I needed help with my
And children,
graphic.
right?
What's that?
Chronic
And
illness and children, right?
and
So,
children. Yes, I
yeah.
think her children were 3 and 1 at the time.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was a lot for her. And I gave her my course and I said, I need help with the graphics. And it's all about managing a home. It's the basic principles I do over and over with my clients. And I just wanted more people to have access to it. And she read the course and she got really excited. And she said, I want this to be more than just a course. So I was like, okay, like I'm along for the ride. And
Right.
Lacey was gung ho. As much as she has chronic illness, she's got way more energy than me at sometimes. And I was like, whatever you want to do, I'm up for it. So we started a business venture together. And we released the course online, which is home management for everyone. So that is available. We can do a link to that. And then we also started a podcast together. So we bring on participants so people can see how the process works. So no shame in the home game. We call it the home makeover show that cares how your home feels, not looks.
Right.
Because if you want to go for looks, that's fine. That's just not what we do. So we created that. And then we also kept working together and realizing we wanted to support people in more ways than just their home management. So we created the Joyful Support Movement, which is we're both so incredibly passionate about. And we've created a village, an online village where it's safe to show up. And we say it's that space between needing a friend and needing a professional healthcare person. Sometimes you're like, you feel like you can't call your friend one more time and you're not seeing your therapist for another week. And it's like,
Right.
where do you show up to make the good times feel better and the bad times feel less bad? And so
Right.
we're creating this joyful support village. And it's we joke about like, where's that village we were promised when we became parents?
Exactly. Right. Right. Yeah. Right.
So
And
we're
that the villages we have are not necessarily always exactly what we need. Right.
yes.
And so, yeah. Yeah. No, I love everything you're doing. Just as a side note, Lacey is going to be on our series later this summer, I think it is. And and I know Lacey as well, and she's also really incredible and has really, um, is living out loud that she's dealing with chronic illness and what that looks like. And I think that that's also very brave to do this. I love everything you're talking about because I think, it's so true that there's these expectations on us and, we're not really supposed to ask for help and we don't know how to ask for help and we don't even know what we need help with. And so I love that, really you're doing this work to say like, start in the home, right? I mean, I'm sort of looking around as we're talking, and I'm like, oh, there's a lot of clutter here, and I don't love it. And like, yes, and I, have accepted, right? I have a very active 4-year-old, and so the house is not going to be spotless, and like I've accepted that. But could I make it better and more, feeling better? Yes, absolutely, I can totally do that. And so, I really love what you're talking about. And then creating your own village. I mean, I think that's so important uh, to do that.
Well, and I think that really loops in nicely to my beginning journey as a parent, which was I felt like I was the only one struggling.
Right.
And I didn't know where to turn to because everything at that time, Pinterest was new and everything looked so pretty on Pinterest and everything looked, and it's like the magazines. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but where are all the people who are also struggling?
Right.
And so Lacey and I are very passionate about like, no, just show up however it's going, and we're here for you, no matter what
Right.
that is. And that's truly something I could have used when I was a new parent. So it's very healing for me. And that's why I wanted you to appreciate all you're doing because you're putting out there what you needed. And
Right.
I think that's all we can do is
Right.
just help others and pay it forward. So that's why
Yeah.
I'm
No,
so
absolutely. For
passionate.
sure. For
Mhm.
sure. And I love that. How does tell us a little bit more about the joyful support movement? How does that look? Is it a platform? Is it, kind of individual counseling, coaching, whatever you want to call it? How does that look?
Yes. So it is whatever you want to make of it. It can be as little as you follow our social media accounts and get a little bit more joy in your life. You can become a friend, which means you get our weekly emails where we talk about the 3 steps, which is sharing your story, finding joy, and taking a step. And so every week we have a prompt and we bring those into your life. So you can bring it into your life that way. If you become a friend, you can watch the course that goes more into depth about how to use the steps in your life. And then if you want to go even deeper, you can become a village member. And so you have this, I talk about how social media is great, but sometimes you show up and you need a reaction that you can't be guaranteed with Facebook or Instagram.
Right.
Sometimes other people are having bad days and they're not saying the things you need to hear. So the village is a place where you can show up and there's sort of this safety bubble around it. So that's another way. And then we also are offering courses and we're going to keep adding courses. Right now, as I mentioned, we have home management for everyone. We have home management for neurodiversity, which helps if you have or you're living with somebody who's neurodiversity, it helps explain ways that you can manage your home with dealing
Right.
with that. And then coming this fall will be home management for kids. So we're going to keep releasing courses, and you can buy the courses independently. And that's part of the step of the 3 steps to
Right.
like, if you have something that doesn't feel good, what step can you take? And so
Right.
that's part of the step part. So yeah, there's a couple of different ways to get involved, and then listening to the podcast underneath the Joyful Support movement. We're going to have 3 podcasts. So No Shame in the Home Game is the step. Lacey has Sharing the Middle, which is all about sharing your story, and then we're going to have Pops of Joy coming, which is going to be all about different ways people feel joy.
Right.
So there's a lot of different ways to be a part of the joyful support movement. And it can be as little or as much, but we always just say, be part of that joy ripple, which is what you're
Right.
doing. And
Right.
when I
Yeah.
talk about home management, and it's about how it feels, like the people going out from your house, how do they feel going out? And that's part of that joy ripple. If you
Right.
can feel 1% better,
Yeah.
and so that's how it all ties
Right.
together.
Yeah. No, no. I mean, I think that's incredible. I think the whole management for neurodivergent. I know that that's, I have friends and colleagues and everything that have they might not be themselves, but their spouses, and that's creating a lot of conflict and a lot of tension. And I agree with you. I think you feel very much what's in the air of a home, if you're there, and like you don't, that you leave with that. And so I'm just thinking like we have the entrance that like we come in through, we just through the garage. There's a big sign in our mudroom that says, "Take a deep breath, you're home now." And, and that was very something intentional where I wanted it to be that this is the safe space for those of us who live here, but for other people who are coming into our home. And so that was very intentional. And it's not something that I experienced as well. And so it was very much like, let's do this. Let's, feel that way throughout our whole home. So I think those are really beautiful ideas. And, in this world, I think anytime we can pop in some joy, that's really amazing to do that.
And also removing the shame element of managing a home, which is we're at this point in history where we're expected to know how to manage a home, but we're not really being taught anymore. I mean,
Right.
some people are, but there's this big gap between being handed keys to a car and not knowing how to drive. And you're like, wait a second, how am I supposed to manage a home when I don't know how to do this?
Right.
So it's like cultivating the feeling you want and being given those basics of like, how do we do this?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Right. No, I think that's totally true. And um, you know, there's been so many shifts in generations as to what managing a home looks like. And, partially because of our lives and partially like values, right? I find um peers in my like in our generation, aren't worried about the picture perfect of a home, right? And they want the livable, this feels good to me kind of aspect. And I don't think that our parents were more on the like appearance aspect of that, right? And I think of like, you know, those of us who can remember like our grandmothers or whatever having plastic on the furniture, right? Or rooms that, kids weren't allowed into, right? Because we needed to keep that pristine. And I feel like that's coming less and less in this generation, that I don't see that at the same level. And I think that that's definitely a shift in how we are managing a home. So I really love that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to kind of ask, what's your advice, and sort of, for parents who are managing kind of both ends of, working and trying to do stuff in the world and, trying to create those homes that feel safe for our kids and comfortable for us. What would be your advice of where to start?
A couple of things. One is get clear on what is it that you want. What is that feeling? What does that look like? How does that feel? And realizing it's not going to necessarily be exactly what your neighbor's doing or your sister's doing, but getting clear on it for yourself.
Right.
And then realizing that I always talk about the three buckets. We all have three buckets of resources: time, energy, and money. So at different ages with your kids, you're going to have a different amount of time and energy to deal with things. And so adjusting your expectations within your resources. And also, I am a big proponent of being curious. Talk to other people. If you go into their home and you get that feeling you're looking for, ask questions. Ask, hey, how do you, and then whatever it is that is leading to that feeling. I love that idea of like kind of picking different elements and then you put them into your own recipe.
Mhm.
But just get curious and ask people and then
Right.
create what works for you, not an exact replica, but what works for you and your family. And then also, I think it's important to have a conversation with everyone who's living in your home because if everyone's on a very different page, it's hard to go in the same direction. If
Right.
you're all
Right.
if you're all going different ways. And so having that conversation of what is it that our family likes to do? Where do we want to spend our time and energy? And making sure that everyone is talking about it so that they know why these certain tasks need to be done and it's
Right.
not just doesn't feel arbitrary.
Right. No, that's a great point. And I think that's so true. And I think, talking about like asking people what they're doing and how they manage things, I think that's so important. It's the same thing as like sharing your stories, right? Saying, I really like that you're doing this and how do you do it? And then saying, does that feel right for me to do? And or not, right? And so I'm just thinking when my son was a baby, a friend of mine messaged me and was like, "How are you managing this like workload and the baby? And you're like super active with baby." And I was like, "My house is a mess." I was like, "That's what I'm going to tell you. That's the honest to God opinion." Like, I had to choose, right? I only had, like you said, only so much time, only so much energy, and so I chose, right? And that may change, especially, talking to you that has a 12-year-old, I imagine that's a very different level of energy and involvement. And so that might be when I get to that point that some of the other stuff, gets picked up again or not. Like, I don't know. And so I really like what you're saying about, asking and really clarifying what you want. And
I had a similar story. When my son was really little, I had a friend who had 4 kids. She had older two and then surprise twins. So she had her hands really full. And whenever I went to her house, there was never any paper, no mail, no bill, no paper. And so I was just fascinated. And I just said, do you mind sharing with me what your trick is with paper? Because that's actually my weak spot. And she laughed and laughed and she's like, "Oh, you know those double door closets by my bedroom?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Oh, if you opened that up, it's like Monica's closet." She goes, "They're just full of boxes and boxes of paper." She's like, "I don't deal with my paper. I just shove it into a closet." So we operate under this assumption a lot of the times that people are doing it all. And it's like, I don't know, do they have a house cleaner? Are they just
right,
burning their mail? Like do they have a mother-in-law who shows up and does their laundry? Like, until you ask, please don't assume.
right. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's really great. And yeah, and we make assumptions about the support system they might have or how they deal with things, that isn't always accurate. And so I really do like that too. I'm thinking of like, it came out during COVID, the like picture, the Zoom camera was perfect. And like, if you zoomed out, it was like, just completely chaos, right? Like if we're only seeing that little portion of it and we're not asking questions and not pulling back, then we're assuming and we're putting that shame on ourselves as to like, we can't do this, right? So like your friend, you're saying they're like, I can't do this with one child. She's doing it with four. And when you finally ask, she's like, oh, here you go. Like, no, I'm not doing it. And that's really powerful, I think,
And
as
that
well.
was exactly, again, that leap from working in people's homes to starting the consulting was every house I went into, I saw two similarities. Everyone had a zone of genius that they didn't highlight because they thought that came easily to everyone. And everyone had some shame spot that they felt like they were the only ones struggling.
Right,
And I went every home I went into, I saw the exact same thing. And I'm like, no, you're really good at this. And this person doesn't do that as well, but they're really good at something else. And I'm like, yeah, you feel ashamed about this. And this person feels equally ashamed about a different topic. And I'm like, why aren't we all talking about this? Like,
right,
why are we all so holding this? And that circles back to that beginning of like, let's just talk about what comes easily to us and what's really hard for us and
right,
not judge ourselves and definitely not judge our neighbors and
right.
just everyone's got their own zone and
Right.
just
Yeah. And no, I mean, I think that's great. And also, I think priorities, right? Like, I'm just thinking, like, I know I had this, for the first year or so that my son was eating solid foods, I made all of his food. Like, he didn't have anything, but that was really important to me. So, like, I prioritized that as something that meant other things didn't get done, right? And so, and you look at it and, I remember friends of mine being like, I feel like I'm like, yes, but I know you are doing other things that I don't have the time to do and that are not as important to me. And those are more important to you. And like, I think sort of realizing that and recognizing those kinds of things of like, I was in a position where I could do that and where it was really important to me. Uh, Not everybody's there, right? And so what does that look like? And that's okay, right? And I can tell you now at 4, I'm not there. So like he is getting sometimes McDonald's on the run and sometimes we're ordering a pizza because I know I can get some protein in him with pizza or whatever it is. And I try to give myself a lot of grace too to say, you know, that's fine. And he is he fed? Is he like healthy? Overall, yes. Could it be better? Sure. But I'm not focused on that right now.
well, and if you go back to that statement about how does your home feel? Could you have made some other meal from scratch? Yeah. Would you have been more stressed and then your son would have felt the stress and the joy level goes down? Yeah.
Probably. Right.
So it's like, yeah, you did the pizza and it was easy and you were able to relax and enjoy one another. So sometimes it's just, again, focusing on what is important in the moment. And if lightening the mood and having everyone feel a little bit better is the priority, then yeah. I always think back, I love there was this funny meme a while ago, and it was this sign. It was like, as your spouse, I can be funny, I can be a good cook, I can be really fit, I can make a lot of money. And then it was like, pick two. And it's just like, yeah, we can't, we're not gonna hit A's across the board all the
Right.
time. Like
Right.
pick two. And
Right.
so yes, I love that. That's why you can't compare because you don't know what two they're picking and what two you're picking. It's like just do what works for you.
Right. Right. And yeah, no, absolutely, for sure. Yeah. And I think, that's something else that and I'm not always great with myself. I tell this very easily to other people, and I sometimes forget myself is, those days that you have, you're operating at 40%. Like if you give that 40%, you've given 100% of who you were that day. And I think that
Yes.
that's so important for us to remember, um, that those are things. And like talking about the home, right? I remember talking to a friend of mine who was like, I mean, I've been a horrible mom. I mean, like one day I couldn't do it. And so we watched movies all day. And, she told me that. And I said, do you know that like your girls probably think you were the coolest mom? And they're probably going to remember this day that you guys all sat and watched movies together. Right. And so you're not. And like the perspective of a kid is, mom let us watch movies all day, and did that. And so, it's just, I think, giving ourselves that grace and talking to ourselves like we would talk to somebody else to tell them, what they're doing is good and feels right. So
Yes. 100% agree.
any advice you would have for, new parents who are maybe first going out to do the balance of work and kids? Anything you would offer as advice?
I would just touch on a bunch of the things I mentioned before, which is go small, go really small. If you're going back to work after having your first baby or your second or bringing home any new human being, just go really small with all of your steps. Instead of shooting for the moon, just shoot for just that next step. Maybe dinner is going to be something super convenient for a while, and that's okay. Going small and remembering it's those feels. It's the watching the movies all day with your kid. It's the feeling. And so doing what you need to do in the moment and like you said, giving yourself grace and that it all changes. And talk about the different seasons, not just seasons like fall and spring, but like the seasons of when a child's growing up, what you have time and energy to do, it changes so drastically.
Right.
And so just knowing that you're going to keep adapting and flowing. And again, going back to talking to other parents, that was one of the things I really enjoyed was from being a parent, I would talk to so many other parents and I would see, oh, I like how they phrased that to their
Mhm.
child. Oh, I liked that snack idea. I never thought about that. So I loved just gathering the wisdom that was all around me and like I said before, just picking all those little pieces
Right.
that worked for me in that season and then
Right.
leaving the rest that didn't work for me.
Right. No, no, I think that's a great point. And I think, yeah, we can learn so much from each other um, and really just like looking at those, like, this is what I like that this family does or this parent does. And what could I take from that and, implement in my life what works. And I think that's really great.
And it's
Um,
okay, like you said, about if you only have 40% to give and you give 40%, you've given 100%. I wish myself as a new parent understood that to its core of I only have so much to give today, and that's okay.
right.
And I wish every new parent to understand that.
Yeah. No, no, absolutely. For sure. I definitely think that's the case. That's so incredibly important to realize. And yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us and, being part of this. I am so excited and I love everything you're doing. I'm so glad I got a chance to really like talk through that and hear it. because I love so many things that you're doing, and I think that they're so helpful. And I will put in a plug. I was part of I don't know what you called it, like a little group that we met a couple times virtually and talked about sort of progress we were making in our home. And I just feel like you were so good with like setting of like, what is it that you first want to attack? And like, what do you want to attack? And I just really felt like I got a lot out of that. And went away from like, oh, this is like a public area that like, people who come over see. And so like, I got to make sure that's great. And really started thinking about like what makes me great. So I love that. And I always am appreciative of that because I go back to that over and over again.
Oh, good. That makes me so happy. And thank you for having me. And again, thank you for the work that you're doing. And I'm so glad that we connected all those years ago over
Yes,
knitting.
absolutely. For sure. For sure. And I will put in all of the links to all of your things. And yeah, so thank you so much for joining me and for watching, and have a great day.
Thank you.